thank you again, Scott. And I am very pleased to introduce Andrew Watkins, who's going to be giving us an update on the Academic Mutual Aid Foundation. And so I'm going to let you share your screen, Andy, and turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Ashley. So I'm Andy Watkins. I'm a postdoc in Riju Das's lab, and I want to talk to you today about the Academic Mutual Aid Foundation. So we are a board of 7 people. There are a few people who are inside and outside the Rosetta community who are less formally affiliated with us. We have a website, we have a Twitter account, we have an email address, and we are all laser focused on improving the material well-being of students and academic workers across the country. So I want to walk you through some realistic scenarios describing how COVID-19 has affected the finances of typical students. So suppose you're an undergrad, you've got a job at a coffee shop to support your education, and you've made the tough choice to skimp on some luxury utilities like Wi-Fi because you're on your parents' family plan still, so you think you can just tether to your phone when you need to do some research for a project. But under COVID, you first lost your coffee shop job and then it went out of business entirely. All education now requires 8-hour days of streaming video. And if you take a gap semester, then you're going to lose your merit scholarship. So you're really in a bit of a bind. Let's say you're a graduate student and the only thing that's helping you cover rent is that you're tutoring on the side. Unfortunately, now your teaching appointment is going away because there's no such thing as discussion section anymore. And if you go to some 7th grader's house to help them with algebra, you're going to get arrested. So the through line here is that the reason that we currently can kind of pretend that higher education is affordable is a sort of deceptive form of financial planning such that you're fine 95% of the time, or let's say 99% of the time. But in those remaining scenarios, you absolutely hit rock bottom. You cannot survive. So the trouble here is that it's not just COVID. You don't need an emergency of this kind of extreme scale to trigger this kind of financial hardship. A graduate student stipend, let's say, is typically something like $30,000 a year, so $2,500 a month pre-tax, and I will grant that is, technically speaking, enough to live on. You can afford food and rent, but you can't really afford to save for emergencies. So let's say you have a car, and the reason that you were able to afford it is because it is a little prone to breaking down. So now you know that you're going to need to spend extra money in maintenance kind of indefinitely, but you certainly can't afford to replace it because you have no savings. Let's say that you decided to take a bit of a chance on your educational trajectory. You went to a conference. It was really scientifically productive for you. But unlike RosettaCon, it's the kind of conference that you actually have to pay for. And you're still waiting for departmental reimbursement, and that wasn't really something you were able to budget for. So let's say you've got a family, and you have a sick parent, and maybe they can't cover their expenses on their own, so you have to pitch in. Maybe they can cover their expenses, but they need some amount of supportive care, so now you're traveling home regularly, and that wasn't exactly in the plan. Or let's say you're not traveling home regularly because they are totally taken care of, but the stress of having a sick parent is really taking a toll on you. Let's say you're going to have a kid. That's wonderful, but it's also a tremendous new expense that you may or may not have planned sufficiently for. The trouble here is that stipends are uniform and financial burden is not. If stipends were significantly higher, then maybe that would be okay because everyone would be able to sock something away every month to plan for financial crisis, but they're not, and so you can't. So if the past 20 years are any evidence, no one is really coming to our rescue here. We can't rely on wisdom or generosity from the government. We have to fight for each other. That sounds scary, but I would argue that we are equal to this challenge because we're a bigger community than just computational biology students, chemists, structural biology students, biochemists, and so on. We share these commonalities with students and academic workers who are outside of these narrow specialties. And part of why I see this as a moral obligation is that material barriers like the ones that I've described are an enormous part of what keeps underrepresented minorities out of higher education, because their personal networks are less able to support them during these kinds of emergencies. So we have to create some kind of replacement safety net ourselves. This kind of effort is not going to fix income inequality, it won't fix poverty, but it is the contribution that we can make. So where does the Academic Mutual Aid Foundation fit in this larger picture? We provide direct cash assistance to students and postdocs who need it. The only things that you have to provide are on the left here. They are your name and phone number and a .edu email address as a simple proxy for whether you are likely to be a student or academic worker. You can give us information about where you are and why you need the money, but that is purely so that we know how to help you better. The hope is the people that we assist will be better able to weather the next crisis that comes around. They're just a little bit more stable. I want to be really clear that I do not celebrate the fact that our organization has to exist. Our existence is a harbinger of a real societal failure, and I wish that this did not feel so necessary. But here's a concise illustration of why this feels so necessary. We have given away $15,000 in less than 6 months, helping well over 200 people. There are students all across the country who can't afford the basic necessities of life. We direct as many people as possible to resources that can help them chronically, like food banks, but it just isn't enough. So part of why I'm talking today is because I want everybody at this meeting to know that they should apply for aid if they need it, and their collaborators should apply for aid if they need it, and the labs on their floor should apply for aid if they need it. This resource exists for you. But another part is because there might be people at this meeting who have been in a tough place financially, or who have had friends who have been in the past. Maybe some of you are interested in making a commitment to help our organization. We do make it easy for you. Our goal in the long term is to become totally self-sustaining, where people who have already received aid, who have now gotten good jobs and have started to get a lot of really comfortable footing in life, will be our primary donors. But in the short term, we do need external income. We're a community with diverse politics, so I will let everyone come up with their own reasons here. But some of you might, let's say, dislike the priorities expressed by the federal government's discretionary spending. One way to fight against these priorities is to channel your money to causes where it can do more good. I want to close here by thanking the other members of the board and everyone else within this community who has stepped up to donate their time, their money, or their effort. Being part of this organization has given me hope during a really dark time. Please reach out to us if you're interested in getting involved in any way. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll love to answer any questions you have.
All right, great. Thank you very much for the talk. And we can use the emoji to say thanks. And so I think we have a little bit of time for questions now. The one that came up in the chat was, can we put the donate link in the chat?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
And I'll be here on all day in the chat and in the Discord. So if anybody, and on the questions Google Doc, so if anybody has questions there, I'll be around.
Great. There's some questions coming up in the Google Doc. One that seems to be typed out fully now is, great talk. Can international undergraduate students apply for the aid?
To my understanding, not at this time, just because there are some restrictions surrounding who we can send money to, just because we have a corporate bank account, but that is something that we want in the medium term. to be able to support students across the country, across the world.
And I think a related question in the doc is, this is a great foundation. Actually, there's lots of sort of comments, positive comments in the doc as well. But a related question is this for academics only?
So right now, our goal is to provide this kind of support to anybody who's a student at any level of training, undergraduate through graduate, or a postdoc, or other academic workers, say research associates, etc. And the reason that we're centering on that community is because we have some prospect of creating this sort of more cohesive academic community that transcends university boundaries or collaborative boundaries, and that is instead focused on our sort of like common aspirations as academics. We would love to help everyone, but it's sort of a challenge of scaling up to the point where we would be able to do that comfortably, right? If we move from supporting anybody who, has a .edu email address to anybody at all of a sudden we have 1,000 times more people asking for help than we can actually assist. So we're trying to start here to try to create this community that can help itself. But obviously in the very long term, we would want resources like this to be available for everyone.
Great. Let's see. So the first question is in the doc now. This is awesome. Love everything it stands for. Since anybody with an EDU email can ask for aid, but the max is $50, it seems spread pretty thin. Would it be potentially better to be more focused on who can get access? Though I hate the idea of it being limited, but maybe for now until it becomes larger.
Yeah, that is a sort of philosophical challenge. I think one of the issues that you run into pretty quickly is that if you try to impose a sort of access limitation, you have a concomitant new administrative burden that's really hard to solve, right? If you develop the idea that only people who have established that they like really need it to a certain threshold can apply for aid, then you need to be able to validate that need is real. And that's hard to do, right? It's very easy to just say, oh, only people who like really need it due to this kind of emergency can apply, and then somebody could just lie to you. And I can't really blame them because they feel like their need qualifies and the language we use on our website excludes them. And that sucks for them, and I can't blame them. And so I would rather make aid available to everybody who applies and work on expanding the amount of money we're able to give away by expanding the amount of money that we have to give away.
Thanks. Another question that came in the chat was, what is the average donation so far?
I think the average donation right now is sitting at something like $150, roughly. Yeah, I don't have that number. We don't have a big army of small donors yet, but we would look forward to developing that.
Do you need more members in the foundation?
Yes and no. If you have an idea for a concrete piece of outreach work that you would like to do, or if have some experience raising money or some experience administering money or giving money away, then we would love to have you working with us. If you have a nebulous sense that you want to get involved, then I think that the thing that would be the biggest help is if you can develop that into like a concrete idea, a way in which you might be able to expand the universe of people that we can assist, then once you've got that concrete idea, I think you could really help us out. But right now, I think we have the right number of people for the actual work that we have to do. So I think that the best thing you can do is come with a project. You know what I mean? Come with something that allows us to expand what we can do.
Seth, you're muted.
I was muted, yeah. Maybe a related question to that, are there any updates on like non-monetary kinds of mutual aid programs like training or skill sharing?
That's a great question. That is a project that we had some small efforts towards. We had a Twitch stream in the early days of the pandemic where Sam DeLuca taught everybody how to make pasta. One disadvantage to having done that in both the early days of the pandemic and our organization itself is that we had a social media following of almost no one. We still have a social media following of almost no one. And so the major viewers on the Twitch stream were a couple members of our organization and like Sam's parents. So it was not either a big fundraiser or skills transfer event, but it was a good demo for how we might want to run that stuff in the future. But I think we're going to need to build a bigger social media presence before we can do that very effectively.
And I think that answers one of the other questions that came up in the chat about the social media presence as well. So yeah, I think that's all the time we have now. So let's thank Andy again and for the great talk and all the work. And we can move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks so much.